The reason I was interested in what you use for your searches is because I will now talk about context information that gives sense to data and makes it findable and understandable, of course, with a focus on PANGAEA data. We are going to have a look at the data model of PANGAEA. What sounds like an awful technical term is actually the key, or rather the key chain to the data published with PANGAEA. So understanding it, or at least a bit of the terminology that I have read already, quite a lot of, will greatly improve your abilities to search for and make use of the data. At the very heart of it is the dataset as a concept. The dataset is described by a wide spectrum of contextual details, the metadata. That spectrum includes information we could consider bibliographical, like context information that is part of the citation, for example, like title, publication year, the abstract, the authors, and affiliations, but also information further describing or defining these entities, like an email address, and a personal or institutional website, or persistent identifiers uniquely attributing the work to one individual or to a research institution. In PANGAEA, we connect the ORCID ID and the Research Organization Registry ID for that purpose. And there is a sampling event. The event is a very central concept in the data model. A lot of useful contextual information gets assigned to aspects of an event. It's like the geospatial and temporal coverage, the campaign information, if applicable, or the sampling method or device, the details about a specific sediment or ice core drill, for example, or about a mesocosm, a specific net to catch specimen for a biological study, or whatever. And a lot of information further defining these entities, like specific sensor and instrument details. Think of model type and manufacturer, for example, or stations on the track of specific platform that host these instruments and sensors, like an aircraft, a ship, or an autonomous vehicle, or the height and depth information in addition to the coordinates and date time of an event. Also the so-called international generic sample number, the IGSN, can be assigned to an event. It's a persistent and unique identifier for a specific physical object. There's also funding-related metadata assigned to the dataset, like certain project information and its, for example, its official website, or funder and grant IDs that further specify the funding and allow to cross-link to additional external information. Yeah, and finally, the data itself. It's usually a digital representation of an observation of an object of interest that was recorded by an observer. This can be an image or video of that object, for example, a specific organism or some interesting properties of that object that are stored as numerical values in tables or in file objects like shapefiles and netcdf. The numerical values in tables are described by a unique name or identifier of the variable measured, a certain method, and by its unit. It may be cross-linked to a wide range of additional resources like other versions of data sets. Think of raw and processed data, for example, to related publication, also cruise reports, related software code, or standard operation procedures. All those details are part of a publication in the end. So in the typical landing page of a dataset, it looks like this. This is an example dataset about oceanographic observations that were measured with an instrument called a CDD. You have a full citation of that dataset and the abstract describing the resource, and the cross-link and citation to some corresponding manuscript publications. It's not a single dataset, but part of a larger collection of datasets, but I'll come back to that later. Scrolling down, you find a link to another version of the datasets. Here, the raw CDD instrument data. Then we have some additional documentation, in this case, specific quality flex scheme. Then we have the associate project and funding information, the geospatial and temporal coverage, followed by the large set of infos concerning the sampling event. Scrolling further, you find a full list of parameters or variables measured, including additional information about them. Then there's the optional change history section to document changes to the dataset over time. And below the usage rights associated to the dataset, in PANGAEA usually the Creative Commons attribution license. All in all, a big pile of contextual information describing the data in a structured way and in detail. To actually download the datasets, we'll have to scroll some more. Finally, we arrive at this download section, and you can either download directly or display a preview first. The previews allows an early glance at the structure of the data table and the numerical values, but also includes only the first 2,000 lines, so keep that in mind. Okay, before we start with the second Q&A session and with the break, please allow me to give a final remark on publication types. I do that because it has certain implications on search and access to data, especially when you use scripts to do so. So the majority of publications at PANGAEA are single data sets, either singular studies or independent supplements to paper publications. But datasets might also be bundled in so-called collections and publication series, repetitions of certain study over time, like a time series, for example, or a more or less unstructured collection of individual studies compiled for a specific purpose. The implication for the work with these collections is that if you don't filter them out in your searches and your scripts, you might end up not with the numerical values included in individual dataset tables, but with zip files including all the tables, documents, and binary files included in that collection. So this will very likely break your routines and results in errors.